You're tuning into the WEC NA Qualifiers on 2P Entertainment. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the WEC NA Qualifiers here on 2P Entertainment. I'm Admirable, and Froden will be joining us shortly. And today we have an incredible tournament to bring to everyone. These are 8 of some of the best players in NA right now. And for our first match of the day, boy, is it a good one. It's Amaz versus Firebat. And if there's one thing I know about Firebat, it's that this guy he is an incredible player. I know a lot of you haven't had a chance to see him play a lot, but I've spoken and played with Firebat, and he is awesome. And you talk about awesome, Amaz coming off of a string of wins in big tournaments lately. This guy is just absolutely killing it. But before we get into the brackets, let's talk a little bit about the rules for this tournament. So this tournament's going to be a best-of-5 series between these players, but each player has brought 4 decks to their lineup. So what happens is both players are going to share their classes with their opponent, and then their opponent has an option to ban one of their classes. That class cannot be used for that series alone. When a player loses with a deck, that deck becomes locked. If a player wins with a deck, they have to continue playing with it, and the first player to have all 3 of their decks loses, and they'll be moving on to the loser's bracket. So with this tournament, with the double elimination, there's a winner bracket and a loser's bracket. So on day 1, we're going to have 6 rounds. We'll be playing through the first round of the winner's bracket. And then on day 2, we'll have the loser's bracket, which will determine our day 3, which is going to be our upper bracket finals, then our lower bracket finals, and then a final show match between the winners, which will be a best of 7 with no bans. So as we said, Amaz versus Firebat for our first match. For our second match of the day, we'll have Strife Crow versus Raynad. Everyone get hyped about that one. For our third match, it's going to be Alchemix versus Reels, and then Tides of Time versus Brad.
It's going to be a really stacked lineup, Admirable. I can't really wait. I'm highly anticipating every single match because there's a lot of stories going into every single player here. We have a mix of the invited players that you've been seeing for a long time since the beginning of beta. We have some new and upcoming young blood with players like Brad and Alchemix and Firebat. These are the guys still trying to make a name for themselves against some of the established old guards. So I'm really excited about this. There's a lot on the line. It's $62,000 for the finals, $2,000 just for qualifying as well. You covered the format perfectly, man. I'm really hyped about all these matches. I think it's really difficult to peg a favorite over everything. These guys are all killers in their own respect. Just like you said, right off the bat, Firebat's been slaying it with ladder. He's even won a few online tournaments for his own belt. And Maz, meanwhile, has been like the offline killer. He's been performing well in DreamHacks at IEMs, falling a little bit short in his BlizzCon qualifier recently. I know because I'm in Taiwan. I'm kind of waiting for him to show up here, but unfortunately, he has to go through another qualifier because he didn't make it here in the Asian region. But I know he's back for blood. He wants to improve his consistency, and despite him being a popular streamer, he's not satisfied with that at all. He wants to be known for being the best Hearthstone player out there.
I can't blame him either. When you've been performing as well as he has lately, it makes you want to be one of the best players in the world. But to be the best player in the world, it means you got to beat the other best players in the world. And I think that coming into this, if you had to pick someone other than Amaz that was the strongest in this field, I would say it's Firebat. He's a young guy who has a great mind for the game. He's doing just absolutely phenomenal deck building, and he understands his matchups really well. One of the things that I was most impressed with is how the very small changes that he's been making to his decks really add up to tremendous impacts in these matches. And something else that he's got a great mind for is this ban and pick format. When I spoke with him a little bit about how the bans worked, he understood how one single ban in a lineup can drastically changes the outcome of it. And when you speak to someone like him and you hear him talk about it, it really shows how much depth that one single ban adds in a format like this. And honestly, I think this kind of format is something that Hearthstone really needed in order to take that next step and become sort of like a more solidified esport instead of just seeing people bring whatever the best deck in the format is at the time and hoping to pick off 3 wins with it.
Yeah, I think so. Firebat showed a little bit of that spreadsheet. He didn't want to share with it too much because it was kind of like a sacred holy grail, but he kind of briefly shared screen with me one day and showed how his pick and ban process goes within his head, and it's very intelligent. Even the Prismatic Cup, I believe he played what, 6, 7 rounds, right? Because he got to the top 6, I believe.
Yeah.
And he was showing me that he had about 80 to 90% accuracy with predictions of how the meta would develop. He said, I'm only weak to this, and no one else ran this. So he was very systematic and surgical with how he's able to dissect the meta game down. This guy's very intelligent about Hearthstone, and I'm very excited to see how he's going to perform because he's one of those people where everyone wants the underdog to come in. Right? They want these guys to perform well. They want to see new guys have the stories other than just the same guys winning every time. But at the same time, he also has a lot to prove, right? He can be kind of out here and lose the first rounds, and everyone says, well, Firebat clearly wasn't up to chop. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think this is going to be really intense. Amaz is known to be a really good player, and he's known to be a lucky player as well. And I wonder how it's going to mess with Firebat a little bit because it's really tough to kind of ban out Amaz in a way, right? Because people for a long time didn't fear the Priest. They said it was Amaz that they were worried about. But now that Naxxramas has come out and week 2 is eligible, like I'm expecting people to play Lotheb and some of these other cool cards, maybe Priest is all of a sudden continue to rise in power so it becomes a more legitimate ban. I'm not sure, Admirable. Do you have any insight into how the week's metagame developed?
It's definitely possible that Priest has gotten a little bit more powerful, but something I think that really is making an impact is how powerful Sludge Belcher is and what it really adds to decks that are missing high-quality 5-drops. And the one that comes to mind for me mostly is Paladin. If we could just jump right in the ban screens, by the way, I'll kind of talk through my thought process. Paladin was really missing a strong 5-drop. At its slot, it really only had Azure Drake, and that was about, or Kodo. And Kodo was a card you wanted to combo with either Humility or with Outdoor Peacekeeper. Isn't something you just wanted to play. And actually, when you take a look at Amaz's lineup, he's got a Priest and a Paladin in his lineup, and what's missing is a Rogue. Wow. I am stunned by that. Yeah, Sludge Belcher was sort of, I think, one of the cards that's making the biggest impact, aside from Lotheb, of course, coming into a tournament like this. And actually, something like Lotheb might be influencing Amaz's decision right here. This tells me he anticipates a lot of people playing Lotheb today, possibly in almost every single deck, and as a result doesn't want to be having anyone leave his Rogue open and then having to play against Lotheb.
It's interesting because I've never seen Amaz bring Rogue to a tournament yet. It still is the case. And in a way, Amaz has kind of avoided the class. Instead, he's picked up other very unique classes, like Hunter was one of his main classes that he brought to tournaments, whether it was Millennium Cup, whether it was DreamHack. And now he's bringing Paladin, which is really unique, but unfortunately we won't be able to see it this series. We still have his Priest, though, and his Priest has been seeing lots of tweaks. We've been seeing teams like Cloud9 even experiment with Priest a little bit. Nimsh was going to bring it to Deck Wars. I heard he was also playing it at the Prismatic Cup, but I didn't get the full deck lists. Amaz, in the meantime, maybe he's kind of taken that idea and integrated it with how it's supposed to function. Meanwhile, Firebat is going to be also playing Hunter, which received that Web Spinner card this past week. A lot of players seem a little divided on its usefulness, but they kind of agreed that some of these Naxxramas cards do improve the consistency of Hunter a little bit with Haunted Creeper. Maybe they play Web Spinner, maybe they don't, but in the end, they kind of agree that Hunter is still pretty viable at the moment. I definitely think so with this ban system.
Yeah, I think the ban system is what really makes a lot of these classes viable. I think it's hard to find a tournament where you find both Paladin and Priest in someone's lineup. But if there's one you can find it, it's this kind of tournament because your opponent can ban the deck that it's weak, that I think both of those are weakest to, which is Miracle Rogue. And at the same time, that brings back things like Mid-Range Hunter. There's a lot of mid-range style decks that aren't playable because of how much pressure Miracle can put on a deck with something like Gadgets and Auctioneer into Preparation Sap. That can just absolutely cripple certain kinds of archetypes, and that's not going to be happening when you can ban Miracle Rogue from your opponent. So you're seeing a lot of still top-tier decks, but you're also seeing some ingenuity among these players as well.
All right, well, it's time to begin and find out what's going to happen with WEC NA Qualifiers game number 1 between Amaz and Firebat. Let's jump into the board and see what classes are being chosen and who's going to be able to strike first blood against their opponent. Keep in mind, guys, that this is on a 10-minute delay, so as much as these are games that are as live can be. Some people kind of wonder if it's pre-recorded and whatnot. These games are fresh, they're relevant, we're going to see new decks, and I'm excited, man.
Yeah, I mean, 10-minute delay I think is totally reasonable. I would like to have a larger delay, honestly, but yeah, it's just not the nature of the beast. Wow, he is playing Web Spinner.
Nature of a beast. Well, speaking of a cool beast, it's Web Spinner. Oh my gosh, I love this card. The more I play with it, and I think I converted Nimsh while playing with it yesterday. I was laddering a little bit. Now now the season's kind of reset, which there is a funny story about the ending of the season for me, Admirable, but we can talk about it later. Web Spinner was hilarious. You know, I've got everything from angry chickens to Raynad type of plays with Tundra Rhino, right? Just all of a sudden getting a Tundra Rhino and making big plays with it. It's really cool, and it messes with your opponent's mind like no other. Like, how are you supposed to kind of account for playing around everything when Web Spinner is kind of the definition of having to play around everything? So at one point, you have intel that your opponent won't have, and it's really cool and a unique card. I love it.
Yeah, that's sort of what makes it so interesting to me, is that a lot of plays that you'll make in a game rely on being able to accurately identify what your opponent's range is going into their turn. So, studying deck lists, understanding the players, what they tend to play, that sort of thing really comes into account. But when your opponent's drawing a random beast, that doesn't happen. So, sometimes it will come to bite them when they draw something like Angry Chicken. But sometimes they'll draw Stampeding Kodo, and you're like, I don't know how to even account for this, because this literally could have been any beast that in the game that he wants to play. So
yeah,
this is kind of exciting, actually.
I'm highly anticipating. It's gonna make the game super fun. At least for one person, maybe not Amaz, if he's the one going up against it. It's already still kind of tough. I don't know if Naxxramas has changed this matchup a lot, the mid-range slower hunter versus Handlock, which Handlock can struggle with a ton, because as soon as they kind of burst through, with initial damage, even if you set up your taunts, they have things like Kill Command to finish the game. From your experience in the past week or so, do you feel like, the matchup's gotten better at all, even if they play things like Sludges or Lotheb, or do you still feel like it's about the same?
Well, I think Sludge Belcher is another one of those cards that does really well in Handlock. It's something it was missing, was just a really strong turn 5 play. It has really good turn 4s between Azure Drake and Mountain Giant a lot of times, but the 5, its strong 5 was basically Faceless Manipulator, whatever my 4 was. So if your 4 got dealt with, or if you just didn't have one, your 5 was one of the weakest turns that the deck had. So adding something like Sludge Belcher can really help counteract that. But I don't know how well it fights against something like Hunter. Hunter is traditionally pretty poor for Handlocks because of how much value Hunter's Mark gives you, and because of the leniency they have to be able to wait, because they're typically not under very much pressure. And in this game, we're kind of seeing that same thing happen, where he's not really too worried about what his opponent's going to do, and he can just take his time and chip away until he gets a big hand set up, which he already has because he has 2 Hunter's Marks. But he's also got Starving Buzzard Unleash, so in case the Handlock's board gets out of control, he's got cleanup at pretty much every different angle he can attack from right now.
Very important to note, Maz does have that 4-drop. Ken followed up with the Soulfire, which I kind of imagine that you don't want to take bad trades early on with Hunter, and you do want to kind of limit the damage of what they can do. He does lose the Nerubian Egg, which is also an interesting tech choice, just because I think it fits really well with Handlock, but some people kind of divide on it, because you can't really put all of those new cards in with Nerubian Egg, with Sludge, with Lotheb, without making some big sacrifices. So I wonder if he's playing cards like the Sludge in the Handlock here.
Yeah, it's tough to be at a point where you have to make sacrifices for all these cards, but at the same time, that's part of where the game's really at, is that you have to evolve. And if you're not evolving, what's going to happen is other people are, and you're just going to fall behind. And we're already seeing the Buzzard Unleash kind of get its thing done. Can you imagine if Haunted Creeper made 1/1s beast?
I feel like that'd be just way too
that
crazy.
Be absurd. This is why they don't make 1/1 beast, by the way. If there was anyone out there who was wondering, this situation came up a lot during their testing, I imagine, and they're like, "Nah, this can't happen." Would be extremely surprised to see him use this other Hunter's Mark here, and I'm a little bit surprised he's not choosing to actually trade with this Earthen Ring Farseer and keep his Buzzard at a really healthy position. But he doesn't really have any more beasts to play. But sort of the threat of that card is really what I feel like is the biggest problem. Like, going into the next turn, his opponent has to kill it. Anyways, we were talking about sacrifices that Handlock has to make in order to get to these points in the game where it wants to be. And that it had a lot of cards in it before that frankly just weren't very good. Like 2 copies of Siphon Soul is a lot of copies of Siphon Soul. Iron Beak Owl is not the most exciting card in the world. It really kind of only works as Ancient Watcher. So while you want some of these cards to be in your deck sometimes, they're the cards I think that you can start trimming first. Is when you get to these kinds of points, it's like, I want these other cards to be in my deck, like Nerubian Egg, but how do I get them in? And the reason, what you do is you just cut the very strong, expensive, clunky cards that you can't typically use very well.
Well, here's a really big, expensive minion that can be clunky, drawn later in the game. It's Mountain Giant. He is running a Ragnaros, which has also been teched in by players like Tice and just MYM in general. They really seem to like that card. But Firebat has the perfect response immediately, dropping his Savannah High main and really putting pressure on the board, making it pretty resilient to AoE as well. You know, even if you drop something and Shadow Flame is for some reason able to clear, Firebat still has a lot of backup with 2/2/2s and 2/1/1s.
Look at this. He's even thinking about how important it is to deal this extra 3 damage. He's considering not attacking so his opponent can't get an easy Molten Giant. But when his opponent's at 3, it's tough anyway. He's going to have to push through a Taunted Giant if your opponent has one, but that's not the hardest thing in the world for him to do right now. He's got so much damage on the board. He's got a lot of damage in his hand. The card that continues to surprise me in this Hunter deck, by the way, is always Oasis Snapjaw.
The Snapjaw?
Every time I see it.
It's crazy.
Do you really need an extra beast that bad?
It's more of the curve, you know, the fact that Hunters a lot of times need to be doing something every turn and pressuring, and the Snapjaw does overperform a lot of times. It also underperforms because recently people have been playing Hunter on ladder, and I get Kodo'd all the time, and I face desk at that point because getting your Snapjaw Kodo'd is just one of the worst feelings, other than maybe getting like your My Exna Kodo'd.
Right.
Rest in peace.
I imagine it's going to take 9 damage here.
Yeah, I think you have that luxury. You're not even coming up very close to the turn where he can Leroy combo. And even so, he's already used one of the Soul Fire, so you're trying to like put yourself slightly out of that range.
Right.
And then I guess at that point you've seen one Molten Giant, and then you just continue pushing for damage then, huh?
I'm pretty sure you can. I mean, it's like a yes and a no. Like, your opponent would like to drop 2 Molten Giants, but he's only got 5 cards in his hand. And he's only so far into his deck, and that's the reason you feel safe against another Molten Giant. Plus, he's already used a Taunter, so he'd have to have another Taunter as well. So it's just kind of hard to give your opponent a position where you're worried about a second Molten Giant. Like, it's just so hard to be worried about it. Ooh, I really like this too, keeping the Savannah Highmane alive.
Yeah, lots of pressure coming up for Firebat. Amaz is down to potentially his last turn, and of course, throughout the entire process of decision-making, you're just kind of wondering if he has a kill command just to finish the game. Also, even what is that secret? And the explosive trap is also very intelligent before the freezing trap, because not only does it get in the damage, but in case something ever got to the point where he needed to play both traps, you kind of want to stagger it in that order, because you don't want something to get freezing trap before they get explosive trapped as well. So Firebat planning out his turns in advance as well. Very intelligent play.
This is pretty hard to win this game. Like, I think if he could just pick what cards he wants in his hand as a Warlock, it'd be kind of tough to win, honestly. Aside from just, Leroy Burst combo. But I don't even know if he could have enough damage if he had the cards he picked. So let's say Leroy for... No, because he has a trap on the board, too. He's still with that.
Yep. Exactly. And as much as he can stall for time with this sludge, the overall big picture is that Amaz is down to his last 5 health, and his opponent can always hero power for 2.
Yep.
So you're just kind of worried whether or not he can get through, and the exact case is that he can. All right, so Firebat needs to get through this taunt some capacity. Sludge is really annoying for that respect. Oh, low tab. But I don't know if he can actually kill him this turn.
This turn, no, but he can cripple him, which is pretty bad enough.
Oh, man. All his spells costing 5 more. I don't know how he's going to be able to deal with this. Maz is going to go down to 1 health, potentially. Or 2 health, rather.
Yeah. Do you trade with the owl here, or do you attack him for 1? I think you attack him for 1.
I think you have explosive trap.
Yeah.
You've got to force him to have the heal. Put him also without the ability to tap for some kind of out.
Yeah.
Oh, and Amaz doesn't draw any kind of heal. No ability to end the game. Because that explosive trap also denies him any Leroy plays.
Yeah, I know. That's brutal. This is just one of those games, though, where Hunter has a very strong matchup versus Handlock. It's just sort of the nature of the matchup when you have 2 copies of Hunter's Mark and a hero power that's dealing 2 damage against your opponent's hero power, which deals themselves 2 damage.
Sure.
A really strong lead from Firebat, honestly.
I think so, and his Handlock proved to be... Well, sorry, his Hunter proved to be pretty strong. And showing off some of those new cards. The Web Spinner, I don't think kicked into that much effect, honestly. But
the Web Spinner draw him the Savannah Highmane?
No, I thought I drew him the Oasis Snapjaw.
Was it the Snapjaw?
I thought so.
I'm
Oh,
pretty sure
was
the
it the
high
high
main.
main?
Yeah, because
Oh
the
man.
snapjaw was golden.
Oh, that is a total. I thought it was a snap draw. Make that big of it, but that is actually the difference maker right there.
I'm pretty
I had
sure it
no
was.
idea. I was kind of missed that. I apologize. My apologies.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about the matchup there, but I'm pretty sure it drew the high main.
Oh, that is nuts. Well, web spinner, pretty good card. Well, it can be until it backfires and gets you something like a Timberwolf in situations where you absolutely do not need it.
Timberwolf's great at every stage of the game, Frodan. What are you talking about? I'd always love to have a
Totally not useless in a top deck situation, right?
not at all. Sometimes
Yeah,
it's that 1 man on 1/1. It really gets work done.
absolutely. Established dominance. So from here, Amaz is already down 0-1. He has his priest, and he has the druid. I'm not exactly sure how well his priest is able to tool against the hunter, but if there's a lot of small annoying creatures and he has things like Cabal Shadow Priests, he has the ability to kind of answer the high mains immediately with Shadow Word Death. Then he can kind of answer those big threats. Otherwise, the druid kind of does struggle if it plays a slower, rampy style where the hunter's able to kind of dictate the pace. The slower the game goes, the stronger the mid-range hunter becomes. So I'm not exactly sure how Amaz has prepared for this tournament, but he could be looking at murky waters right off the bat.
I honestly don't think he anticipated something like Hunter being a class that was chosen, and that's sort of indicated by his lineup. Paladin's really the only deck he has that fights Hunter very well, and I feel like Handlock, Druid, and Priest do pretty poorly against it. Because if you find yourself in a race against Hunter, and you're in the Priest position, what ends up happening is they have Savannah Highmane and you don't. So that ends up being really bad news
I guess
because
simple math, yeah.
they just have a 6/5 for 6 mana that replaces itself. And then if you get in a position where you want to try to race, they have the Eagle Horn Bow in addition to the traps. They have a hero power that's counteracting your hero power every turn, and they're making very small pushes on the game that end up mattering a lot because there's a certain point with Priest where you have to extend into the board. And once you've extended in the board, then you've opened yourself up to Starving Blizzard and Unleash the Hounds. There's not an effective way to fight it. You have to get a pretty aggressive start and then start punching right from the beginning, or you're going to fall behind. And I think that the inevitability goes pretty high in favor of the Hunter simply because his cards are much more powerful in the mid game.
All right, well, let's find out what happens in game number 2. We are ready for the mulligan screen, so let's jump straight to it and find out what Amaz has planned. He is going to go with his priest, his golden priest, and he does get cards that he needs to start off early game with the Injured Blade Master and Power Word Shield, but he would love to have started on the coin as well.
Yeah, I think in this matchup, when you're in the priest spot, you want the coin. And I think you want the coin simply because you get an extra spot on your mulligan. I don't really think it's as much about the coin as it is about the information and being able to mulligan to the right cards consistently.
Yeah, I think so. I think it also synergizes well with Pyromancer, and in the back of the mind, Amaz always has those abilities to board clear very effectively. He's going to go for a complete swap and see what he gets. So Amaz has a game plan. He knows his deck much better. Oh, too bad he got Circle of Healing after he got injured Blade Master. He could be thinking it's a little too slow and he needs faster action.
Ooh, this is
But
a
talk
bad
about
hand.
being slow. I'm not exactly sure how Amaz is going to be able to start off this game. His opponent seems to have a pretty stable start with a very good turns 2 to 4.
Yeah, turn 2 Animal Companion, followed by turn 3 Animal Companion. It's pretty good. And when you're in Amaz's spot, you've got your best friend on the left side of your hand with 2 Holy Novas right from the get-go. That is, that's not a good hand to have.
I wonder what he was so mulliganing so hard for. This is probably one of the slowest starts I've ever seen Amaz have with Priest, and that's always one of those 1 out of 5 games, or even more often, maybe 1 out of 4 games, where you're playing as a Priest, and sometimes you just absolutely can do nothing. You just have to pass, and you're at the mercy of your opponent.
Yeah, Priest is a very reactive class, in my experience
man.
with it. Oh my gosh, he makes Huffer right out the gate, too. And Amaz does not have a smite. Ugh.
But he picks up at least something to do in this turn with Farseer, so at least there's that.
It's better than nothing.
If his opponent has an Eagle Horn Bow, though, how sad are you?
Pretty sad. There's a lot of things that Firebat can have here that aren't very good for him, honestly.
Well, we'll see what he rolls with the second Animal Companion. Maybe another 4-tag creature like Misha, and that could spell disaster for Amaz.
Well, he needs to consider, I think Freezing Trap is at least a consideration. Oh, that's actually, I think, one of the worst ones he could make. because it opens them to Shadow or Death.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if you Death here or not, but now the option's available.
Well, Amos picks up Thought Steal off the top, which can be really good. Sometimes you pick up like a Flare against the Hunter for your secret, so you can eliminate it. Sometimes you pick up something really efficient to take out the Highway, like maybe a Hunter's Mark or whatnot. So he's going to drop immediately. He gets Unleash the Hounds and Freezing Trap.
Wow.
Huh. All right.
That's
we'll
weird.
see how he's able to kind of put it to use. Amaz is one of these guys who's able to figure out puzzles of how to utilize opponent's cards very effectively, but those don't jump off the screen immediately of their practicality.
Not quite yet. I see Unleash the Hounds potentially being valuable later on. But, of course, at the moment, it's pretty bad. Your opponent's got a 7 health and a 4 health minion on the board. Unleash the Hounds is not going to be getting it done.
Nope, but he does have Injured Blade Master.
So he's staying in this game. That's really the important part. He's not out of it. He's starting to stabilize. These Holy Novas might come into effect here. But I'm surprised he's not further behind, given how terrible his start's been. I mean, he still hasn't played a card from his opening hand.
Well, he's been living off the top of his deck, with Thought Steals, with the Farseer, with the Injured Blade Master. So I guess it only got better from that point on, right? Unless if he drew like into his 6 drops into like Holy Fire, that could have just been straight up game because he would have no response until turn 5 or 6. But now Fire Bat still has to deal with the fact that a trap's been played. Most likely it's Freezing Trap. And how is he going to respond to this?
I wonder if he has Flare in his deck. Like, if he doesn't have a copy of Flare, he's got to pop this trap now. Like, there's no option to waiting. You have to do something about the trap.
And either way, you're giving up a lot of position. Most likely, you're giving up something like Hunter's Mark as well. You have to kind of deal with it early. Pave the way for your Savannah Highway to be effective the following turn. And this is definitely the right choice. You don't want to lead off with the Oasis Snapjaw and be in a position where you have to kind of give up the board and use the Hunter Mark. So in this respect, at least he's able to kind of put down the Hunter's Mark effectively.
That's a really risky attack, because what if that just happens to be... Like, maybe he knows there's only 1 explosive trap in the deck, and that's... I guess it has to be Freezing Trap if he only has 1 explosive trap, so it makes the attack with the Leok not that bad. But if that's Explosive Trap, he just suicided the Leok into a 4/7.
Huh. Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. It's like, I don't know. So I think it's a pretty telltale sign that he's got 2 copies of Freezing Trap and 1 copy of Explosive Trap in the deck.
Yeah. It's good intel, definitely. And, Amaz does have that Unleash the Hounds utilized pretty intelligently, and immediately just starts going to work on the board. Unfortunately, he still has to deal with a Savannah Highman that's coming out, but he does have that Shadow Word Death. The follow-up, though, can be just as nasty. So as much as you def it, if you can't deal with the 2/2s immediately, you put something like Houndmaster, you're back at square one where he has a very intimidating board. Yeah. But this is where Maz can start turning back the matchup a little bit, because he's got those Holy Novas. He's got Shadow Word Death, even has Loatheb to kind of mess with his opponent and disrupt him on really important turns.
Oh, that Stone Test board is actually a pretty important draw. That really changed the way this turn went. Oh my gosh.
Keep it the chain of draws as well. That's nice.
That really changed how this turn panned out. Because he would have had to use the Hunter's Mark before, I think, anyway. So the Snapjaw was going to bite the dust. But now that he drew the Stone Test board, it allows him to use the Buzzard and kind of string together some draws. I'm very surprised that he doesn't play the Haunted Creeper there. That's peculiar to me.
He doesn't want to get Holy Nova'd with like a Pyromancer, because that would have been disaster. Amaz draws the Shadow Word Pain, which would have been excellent a few turns ago.
Still really not that bad.
Yeah.
But he's actually starting to put together a pretty nice recovery here. He's still at 18, and Firebat's got some damage that's coming together now. Unleash the Hounds. That could be good later on.
You know, he's really resilient, and he also wants to play around Cabal Shadow Priest. Doesn't want to give his opponent ability to steal something, like Haunted Creeper, get insta value. Very powerful value, in fact.
I noticed that Firebat's actually trying to hero power every single turn. And I'm curious exactly why. Like, there's not like a big push for lethal in his hand. So I don't know what the real game plan in here is. Is he just trying to keep the hero power at bay? What do you think he's doing? Like, why hasn't he played the high main yet? That's the only thing I keep thinking is, why hasn't this high main hit the board yet?
Well, I can understand exactly why you wouldn't play something like the Haunted Creeper immediately if you don't want your opponent to get Cabal Shadow Priest. But the high main is very important and stressful for your enemy to deal with immediately.
Right,
so he drops it here.
This is what's weird is now your opponent's played Lotheb.
Yeah.
So now it's kind of easy to clear your high main, is it not?
I think so.
This is what I don't understand. This this is very peculiar to me. I don't know if I'm convinced.
He could be playing around something that we're not really sure of. But Maz will likely Holy Nova. Do you want to draw a card off of this though before you're able to actually do anything?
So, yes.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to draw 2 cards?
Maybe he doesn't want a Holy Nova yet. It looks like he's thinking.
Oh, really?
It looks like he's thinking about attacking the 2/2 with Lotheb and using the Hound that's in his hand.
Well, I mean, I think the debate definitely has to be something also like, does he want to draw a second card? But I think missing that damage is a little bit too crucial, given how much health you have. If he has something like Leroy, the game could be ending in the next turn or 2.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking, too. You have to actually start killing your opponent.
Huh. All right, so Firebat has a lot of answers to stuff, you know, like the explosive trap with the Hunter's Mark. He's got Unleash the Hounds, even Kill Command to a certain extent. He's kind of have to piece together a way to end the game.
God,
but against Priest, that's one of the most difficult classes to try to seal the game and calculate damage. What if he just simply draws Holy Fire and you set up lethal?
Yeah, Holy Fire.
And all of a sudden that 10 damage swing.
Holy Fire is the card that swings this game right now. If Holy Fire comes out, I don't know if Firebat's going to have any chance to win. As it stands, I think that just 2 Unleashes and pointing them at your opponent's face along with your hero power is totally fine. Your opponent's used 2 Holy Novas now. If they had a Wild Pyromancer, they likely would have used it at some point. It's pretty unlikely. I feel like your opponent has Wild Pyromancer and spells to sweep this board after they've just used 2 Holy Novas, and you've kind of gotten to this point in the game. Like, this feels just like a very straightforward double unleash, hero power, attack my opponent's face turn. And there's some considerations, I think, also to using potentially Hunter's Mark or even Kill Command, but I think you just point everything in the face. It just sets them so low, and between your hero power and the beast in your hand, you have 7 next turn.
Yep. All right. So let's find out what Amaz is able to draw here. He needs something to get rid of these Hounds while healing himself outside of that range. Needs to get above 7 health. That's the priority for him, as well as deal with the board. Silence.
That's not going to do it.
Well, he can top deck something else with the Azure Drake, but he needs something big.
It needs to be Earthen Ring, I think.
I don't even know. It needs to be the Earthen Ring.
Yeah, I don't even know if Earthen Ring saves him here. Clears 3 minions, heals himself.
No, it doesn't.
No.
Unless there's a surprise. Unless there's a surprise somewhere that we're not expecting, like an unstable ghoul. And he's able to, but he still can't even heal outside the range. Yeah. I think Firebat has safely secured this win.
Yeah, I think he has too. This was his plan coming into it with the hero power every single turn. Was he wanted to get to a point where he had just enough damage to finish off his opponent through anything that was going to happen. Big kudos here to Firebat for skipping to play the Savannah Highmane for a couple turns and instead getting value out of his hero power.
Unless he was able to draw something really nice. But I think he's going to heal himself, definitely. And Amaz is going to try to position himself as best as he can to board clear. But I think he realizes that this game could be over, assuming his opponent had any way of doing damage with 5 from the hand. And that's exactly what he has with Kill Command. Houndmaster, you're not needed. And Firebat's going to jump out to a 2-0 lead and force Amaz to rely on his Druid in order to take this game.
Wow. That's a pretty brutal game to be in. With Amaz's opening hand, it's just kind of rough. He didn't play a card from his opening hand until turn 6, was it, or turn 7?
Something ridiculous.
He was just playing with 3 less cards the entire game, basically. So just a tough spot to be. Just a bad break for Amaz. Honestly, I don't think there's really much else to say about that game. I think both players played really well, and it just comes down to Amaz. This is one of those really poor hands that was drawn.
It happens. But Amaz's not out yet. We're going to take a quick break and get ready for the third game. You're watching WEC Qualifiers for North America. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to World Esports Championship Hearthstone for North America. We're in the middle of a series between Amaz and Firebat. Amaz is down 0-2 after two great plays, or two great games, rather, with strong play from Firebat. He's able to set up and position himself to be successful for two straight games. Now we're going to see Druid versus Hunter. Amaz has a 3-0 from here. Now he has 3-0'd plenty of times with his Druid deck. I am Shenzhen in recent memory. But we'll find out whether or not he's able to kind of get those draws. Not to mention that we don't know what kind of Druid he's going to be playing exactly. Now that week 2 of Naxxramas is out, Druid metagame has kind of been thrown into a whack. People are more deviating or differentiating themselves among their opinions on ramp or token, which one's more viable. The hybridish feel has also started to wear out more. No one's really playing those weird mix of token and ramp where you have like those wild growths with Violet teachers anymore. I think they're kind of making clear-cut decisions and refining it a lot more. We're finding out whether or not Amaz and Firebat are exactly ready, but I think if you kind of have to pick one person to do well with Druid, I think Amaz has shown that consistency. So let's jump into the game and get ready for potentially a 3-0 from Firebat, or will Amaz start the comeback train?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I wanted to talk about that when you were with the Druid evolving. It's like it's so divided now. Like before, it was always like people were like, "Oh, well, I don't know if Charge Druid's best or playing a copy of Ancient War," and it was small changes that were making a big difference. But now you're just seeing drastically different Druid strategies, kind of like going to the drawing board and then people picking from there. So I don't know if Amaz is token or not yet. It looks to me like he's sticking with the good old standard style, which is the one that I like personally. I think token's fine. But when I'm playing Druid, one of the things I want is a very high density of late game draws. Because you have cards like Innervate, and because you'll often have cards like Wild Growth, sometimes your late game draws are very hit or miss. Either you draw something like Wild Growth or Innervate, or you draw something like a 5/5 that draws cards when it comes into play. So when you add stuff like Argent Squire and Power of the Wild to that mix, you lose a lot of your mid to late game power, which is where I think that Druid really shines. So in my opinion, token is just strictly taking away from what Druid does best, which is have the late game power plays. But if there's something that we know about late game, it's that Hunter scales into its late game very quickly. And because of that, it's hard to take advantage of your late game when Hunter's pressuring you so much more early on. And even when you look at this hand, Amaz has had a Wild Growth, which is going to help keep him in this game, but Firebat's got 2 copies of Savannah Highmane already, and that's one of the biggest problems for Druid to deal with.
Interestingly enough, if that becomes the case where Amaz feels like his opponent might be holding something, you can even smack down Loatheb and disrupt a coin, right? The coin would cost 5 mana, which would be such a reverse anti-tempo thing of what the coin represents. It's supposed to be able to squeeze out something a little bit earlier, but congratulations, you just lost 4 mana.
Yeah. Speaking of losing some mana, Leok is going to make sure that Firebat loses some here, because it's not the one he wanted right now.
Yeah, and he's able to kind of safely plop down this Drake. Oh, well, he's going to swipe instead then.
Yep.
Immediately deal with all kinds of threats. All right, fair enough, fair enough.
It's costing even more mana than the original 3.
Yeah.
Because now it's costing
I think that's intelligent, too.
As well.
If he has Houndmaster or something, you kind of don't give him any opportunity to collect value.
Right. So a pretty strong start from both of these players. Amaz is going to end up with initiative here. Honestly, I would like to see Amaz play Loatheb right here too. And one of the reasons why is because your opponent's moving into their coin turn. So if they coin a Savannah Highmane on 5,
right,
that's where they can pick the game back up. So he can take that play away from his opponent. And then it also shuts out Freezing Trap this way. It limits your opponent basically to playing something like Oasis Snapjaw. Like they can't play any trap.
If he has it.
Right. I mean, like Loatheb, I think, is just very easily the play here. That stings to see that.
It does. And I think this is also one of those situations where Loatheb is so relative in terms of how you actually choose to play it. And I think with this coin Savannah Highmane, Amaz realizes he probably should be throwing out his Loatheb. We obviously know that was the optimal play, but it's not so clear-cut. Ooh, but he top decks a keeper, which is important to have a response to the Highmane. But when there's back-to-back Highmanes coming out, and you don't have an immediate way to smack down the first one, it's still going to be really tough to kind of fight back from that position.
Yeah, this is tough. This is another tough turn, too, is because the keeper here is strong, but it's not quite getting the job done. Like, this Savannah Highmane's still sticking around unless he wants a hero power, which is what he's going to do. Gosh, this whole game would have been different if he used Lotheb instead. It's hard to even tell what would have happened, but he does have Ragnaros, so Ragnaros can help get him out. Maza's always playing with Ragnaros. Is this real?
That's exactly. I mean, that's what he wants. Ragnaros in every deck.
Now,
why do you play Miracle Rogue? You can't play Ragnaros and Miracle Rogue.
He is gonna YOLO it too. Oh my gosh, Senor del Fuego. This is a big hit, by the way. He needs it to hit this high main.
And he snipes it. Very nice. Now, both high mains have been dealt with, which is one of the tougher cards that Druid has to deal with this matchup. Not to mention that the following turn, he also has Spell Power Swipe to potentially clean up wherever comes up on the board.
Yep. Savannah High Main is definitely one of the biggest hills for this deck to climb, and he's kind of done it at this point. There's still a lot of damage on the board that he needs to deal with, but as you said, he's got Spell Power Swipe, which is a really big turn for him. And then even once his board's been clear and he gets the Spell Power Swipe down, he can Lotheb to shut his opponent out from using a big Starving Buzzard turn, if that was in his range. So he's kind of shutting down everything that's coming through here.
Huh.
So this attack is going to end up being really good for Amaz, I think. I think this 4/4 is going into the Keeper of the Grove, and I think there's 2 more points of damage going in the face. The Spell Power Swipe's going to clean up the board. He's going to be left with Ragnaros. That's what I see happening. But he's also really considering killing this Ragnaros. His instinct, for whatever reason, was to kill this Keeper. I actually didn't even see that kill command in his hand. Now that I see the kill command, that's really scary. I don't know why he's not killing the Ragnaros. Oh, geez.
Well, I mean, you load up the targets. You have Leroy. Is there a way to kill up next turn? If you had Leroy kill command, that's 11.
Is he just going for lethal?
14. Yeah, this is a setup for lethal, assuming his opponent wasn't able to deal with it.
Yep. Oh my gosh, and he picks up Force Nature too.
Even so, he does have an Innervate, so he can also combo big things with his Ancient of Lore if it draws something nice. Ancient of Lore into a Lotheb is so devastating for your opponent because there's 10 damage. Now he has to deal with a Ragnaros, and he lost his immediate way to deal with it. He might have to use something big like his Leroy.
Yeah, this is bad news for Firebat. I think I don't know if disrespecting Ragnaros is the right play here. Honestly, I think that's going to end up costing him a lot of ground in this game.
I also don't know what to think about freezing before explosive. I think generally in almost every scenario, explosive before freezing is superior, so that way it's not triggered by something like Force of Nature. But I guess in this context, you're so low, you might just die to anything.
Yeah,
whether it's just straight up Savage or...
In this one spot, freezing first matters, because if Azure Drake runs in, it'll get freezing trapped, and then the explosive trap will sit there. And then afterwards, Force of Nature combo will get disrupted by explosive trap. So that's the reasoning for that specific order.
Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, so the freezing trap does proc. And from this point
wait, what?
Okay, so that's exactly what I thought first. I was like, oh, Admirable's about to school me on the game and teach me something. And then this happens. I was like, I thought that in every respect, the explosive trap triggers anyways.
Does it
really? Because it says whenever your hero's attacked.
Huh. I didn't know that. Anyways, the game's gonna end.
Well, this game was ended. That was a mistake from Firebat, but I don't think it actually mattered because Amaz had enough damage covered for sure. And now the comeback train has began with Druid, which is very explosive. He does play those Force of Natures, but he chose not to reveal it as well, which is very intelligent, I think. If he kind of shows Ragnaros, shows the Wild Growth, maybe his opponent feels like he might not even running combo. You kind of hide that information versus Druid the Claw. That's pretty standard. You expect that in almost every Druid deck because it's such a staple card.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when he shows the Ragnaros and he doesn't show very much else, it's sort of exactly what you were thinking about. The image he's trying to portray there is that he's playing Ramp Druid. So he wants his opponent to think about, like, I don't have combo. And at the same time, if in this game he shows combo, his opponent might just think that he's playing Wild Growth with combo and Ragnaros. So then Ancient of War might not be in his opponent's mind. So little tiny things like that can add up to a big game at the end. In this game, it won't matter so much, but if you see all the pieces come together, it can matter. But yeah, the biggest hump in that game, as we were talking about, was being able to effectively deal with both Savannah Highmains, and then Firebat, I think, may have acted a little quickly when he decided to not kill Ragnaros right off because he had such an easy answer to it. He could have just used Kill Command and then used the tokens from Savannah Highmain, and you're looking at 16 less damage that's being dealt that game.
I mean, decision was easy for us to make relative to the information we had, but
Sure.
Firebat would be giving up his way of lethaling, right? That's what he did the previous 2 games. Assuming his opponent couldn't be able to deal with it immediately, he had a way to kill the following turn with Leroy Kill Command and his weapon and what he had on the board. So Firebat positioned himself to hopefully be able to end the series. But I think with that kind of lead, you can take those bets. You're up 2-0. I think you're comfortable with it. You still have Shaman, which is great against what Druid's normally able to throw out, especially if they have things like Cairn. You just hex it and immediately gain so much tempo from it that oftentimes Druid can't really come back from something that devastating.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot to be said about setting yourself up for lethal too, because part of going into these turns where you're making these risky plays is your opponent does have to have a perfect range to be able to counter what you're doing. So if Amaz's range in that spot is just a bunch of strong minions, Firebat actually just kills them. So it's like a lot of it's about interpretation and stuff too, but it's like more. It's tough to weigh because your opponent's drawn so many cards and you're so late into the game that there's a lot of things in his range that counter it too. Like it's not just spell power swipe in that instance. Like Force of Nature Savage Roar can counter it. Even if your opponent just has like Wrath and a charge minion, they're able to start pushing back through your board. So just a lot of little things like that come into account. And you know, when you're in doubt, you should just push for lethal. You shouldn't play safe when you're in doubt like that. You should just kind of go for the win. You'll learn the lessons afterwards. But you can never fault someone for trying to push for lethal because it's always a good spot to be in.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Now, Firebat does have really interesting cards right off the bat. He does have the Haunted Creeper, which we've been seeing for the past couple of weeks. Be very versatile with things like Flame Tongue Totem and give you board presence. But also the Sludge Belcher. That's a card I didn't exactly piece 2-2 with Shaman, right? What do you think about that?
I think that it's another one of those cards that works really well. Like Shaman's only 5 was Azure Drake. And while Azure Drake's really nice, sometimes you need a bit more defense on the board. So this is kind of giving them more of that defensive stance that they want a lot of times and preventing them from being pushed out of the game really early.
All right, sure. All right, coming up on important turns for Maz. He kind of wants to continue following up with this Harvest Golem. He coined it out, but now he doesn't have a direct response to it. I guess he's just going to have to hero power this down.
Yeah, not really much else to do here.
Yeah,
His
not a very
heavy
sexy
at this
play.
point.
Now he does have Faceless, and he does have those Ancients, so it feels like he might be running that ramp with just kind of that one copy of the combo and try to play it a little bit slower, but you still have the ability to burst. It seems kind of right up Amaz's alley. In fact, I feel like the deck that he ran at IEM Shenzhen, the only thing kind of missing from this are the Mark of the Wilds. They kind of combine with the Faceless, because we did see that Ancient of War, so maybe Amaz does have that, and he's running something he kind of knows.
We also saw Mark of the Wild, and he mulliganed it in this opening hand.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so it is very similar to that. Okay.
Yeah.
My mistake.
He likes this tried and true ramp deck, and I can't blame him either. Again, it's just one of the things that I like about Druid is you can fill your deck with such a strong draw density that if you keep parity with your opponent going into the late game, you just have a huge advantage because you just have better 7 and 8 mana cards than they do. Like, what decks can afford to play that many 7 and 8 mana cards?
Not many.
Frankly, yeah, right. There just frankly isn't that many, but Druid's one of them because of cards like Innervate and Wild Growth.
Yeah, in a way, it's so funny that when I was talking to Strifeco was like, oh man, Druid's so honest. You have to kind of play the way you have. And I'm like, Innervate is anything but honest. Allows you to get away with so much.
Whoa, what are you talking about? Innervate's a totally fine card. They're imbalanced. Everyone should be able to
slow them, and then they can't do anything.
Hey,
right?
look, anyone can innervate. All right, all they have to do is play Druid. We don't need Druid to get nerfed. Why would you want to do that to my favorite class? Wow, this turn 5, by the way. This is how much Nax is impacting the format. By the way, it's just a few cards that we've seen come into it, but Firebat's got 3 Nax cards in his hand. And which one do you play?
Take 3 different approaches to how you want to pan out the next couple of turns. Sludge is definitely more defensive. Nerubian Egg is a board development, and really making yourself resilient further to that AOE. And he also does have that Rock Biter, so that way he has a way to activate the egg. If you kind of don't play the egg here and you play your other 5 drops, it's going to get increasingly more difficult to play it safely. So he's going to opt for this immediately. Oh, okay. Well, he's going to use his Rock Biter. It makes sense. Take out the threat.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. Excuse me. It's hard for him to save the Rock Biter here because he's staring down the 4-2. So the 4-2 is just going to be putting a lot of pressure on his board. So
Sure.
I think what's happening is his 5-drop was consisting of no matter what Rock Biter, and he just didn't really have anything else to do, so he might as well use Nerubian Egg.
Fair enough. Does top deck a Fire Elemental, but he does have that Hex to kind of immediately deal with that Druid Claw.
Hex is kind of presenting the same issue, by the way, which is he doesn't really drop anything on the board if he chooses to Hex. He's going to go with
I think that's too intimidating. He doesn't have a way to answer it immediately with something like Fire Elemental.
Yep. There's nothing wrong with having to totem a bunch. Use it like over toteming is fine because it puts you in a position where something like Flame Tongue Totem ends up being a monstrosity. Like right now, Flame Tongue Totem is a potential 6 damage on a minion.
Oh man,
straight away.
It is so much value, and that makes it really scary for something like Ancient of War. Because Ancient of War has a lot of health, and you're kind of happy he uses Hex. But if he drops Flame Tongue Totem, then all of a sudden, he trades exactly what he wants. Very low-cost minion totems, and takes out a big one. So Moz has to kind of be planning out his next couple of turns on how he wants to set this up, so that way he can pave the way for a very effective Ancient of War.
Yep, I agree. This is a tough turn, too. None of his plays are very effective right now.
Yep.
I guess you silence the egg. And then 1 damage to the face. Like, that's not the most exciting turn 6. 2-4, go.
I think this is going to enable the Fire Elemental to come out as well. At the same time, are you afraid of a potential spell power swipe of some kind? I don't know. One of those cards, you kind of mentioned that there are cards that immediately you start thinking about cutting. Thalnos is one of those cards. I see Druids kind of dropping it. You know, they're kind of okay parting with something like Wild Growth if they're playing that. But Thalnos is also a card that kind of surprised me, since relative to what Druids have, it improves consistency, it gives you that spell power. But not every Druid runs Thalnos anymore, so you can kind of pick up that intel after a while by playing a lot of games. But that's just kind of tossing it out there based off what I've been seeing in the metagame.
Yeah, a lot of them cut it before. So if you're playing with a bunch of next cards, I imagine it's definitely the cut now. Yeah, I'm curious how long it takes before cards like that will cycle back in, because people are willing to get so greedy with so many 2-health minions that you're able to punish them with cards like Starfall or even Spell Power. The Spell Power swipes, that is. Loatheb here is protecting
is an anti-swipe tech here. I like it. It makes sense. I mean, either one was okay. One deals with the board immediately. The other was able to set it up so that way you're more resilient to it. But swipe is going to pick up a lot of value here.
Yeah, I imagine you have to swipe. He's going into 7 mana. Yeah, so draw the card first, just in case anything changes. Doubt anything can. Oh, those are 2 really bad draws right now.
Yeah, late game Wild Growths, I mean, they can be useful in those pinch situations if you need to draw for potential lethal or something with 4 or 5 mana. But in this scenario, Maz can't really utilize that, so they're sitting dead for all intents and purposes. But at least he's able to deal with a big threat like Fire Elemental pretty effectively.
Yeah, important to be able to deal with the Fire Elemental here. You can't just leave it on the board and allow it to keep repetitively dealing 6 damage. That's when you start to fall behind. Shaman is when they start getting value out of their minions. It's like a lot of times they're expending everything trading with you turn after turn. So the first turn they get to actually put damage into your face is where they start to take control of the game. Because then they're able to use a removal spell and then continue developing their board. Cairn here, by the way, looks like a really good draw if you're in a Mazda spot, but he's very worried about something like Earthshock or a second Hex. And his opponent's only got 2 cards in his hand. We know he has one, but this is the difference he's debating between. And honestly, he doesn't have time to bait out another Earthshock or Hex. He's just kind of got to go for it. He's already getting so low, and his opponent's got such a huge board.
Yeah.
But what can he do?
Well, exactly. I think he's staring at the opportunity where Shaman could pick up insane value. He's really trying to play around any kind of last removal, so that way he can get optimal value. It's much easier to even draw another Innervate and faceless to Cairn, so that way it's difficult to deal with. So he's going to get rid of the more expensive minion of mana cost. And also Cairn is a little bit more versatile and flexible than Ancient of War. Ancient of War is a little bit clunkier in that respect. It's just kind of a big sponge, which absorbed the biggest of sponges, which is Hex. Now Amaz is kind of like wondering what the last card is, but still, I think he has to kind of deal with the fact that he has a huge board to deal with,
He needs a spell power right away. Oh,
Mm.
Lothab's not it. Oh, you know what he could do? He could faceless manipulate their spell power totem.
Oh. But still, that wouldn't. I mean,
Oh, his opponent had an unbound elemental.
no. Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
see that. I thought that was. What did I think that was? The screen's blurry. It's hard for me to see it. I'm gonna be
No, I understand what you mean. That was a creative play, though. If he was able to kind of piece that together. But instead, he's going to use his removal on that unbound immediately, and that top deck into the fire elemental was huge.
That is a really big draw right now.
Yeah.
I don't really
Oh
know if he
my
needed
God.
it, but it's certainly going to help seal this game up.
I think so, because now Amaz can't really take a turn to develop, and this could be his last turn, because he did use his swipe, which is a convenient way to kind of remove most of the board. These totems haven't really been coming much into play. It's just really the fact that this board has never been pat down by the Druid. This is exactly what this matchup is about. If you're the Shaman players, establishing something, using cheap removal like Hex to kind of continue to build up your board presence. And this is where Shrifegro says Druid's honest, right? Because you can't actually just flip the board on its head unless you play something like Poison Seeds with Starfall. That's like the only way I feel like Maz could have two-comboed his way out of here.
Yep. And there's the desperation move. And the bad news will ensue. Sludge Belcher just stuck on the hand, by the way. He's just watching from the sidelines. Wrath is... Well, Wrath can kind of keep him alive for another turn. He can Wrath the 2-3 and then Hero Power the 1-1. And then drop to 1 life. So if his opponent has 1 damage, he's dead. Oh, we can also
going to keep
her
her instead.
Yeah. This works as well.
Okay. See what he's able to kind of do from here. The onus is back on Firebat. He has 8 damage, so if he draws a Rock Biter, a Lightning Bolt, and maybe even a Doomhammer, Firebat can end this game right here and move on to the semifinals of the winner bracket.
Lightning Storm's not going to end the game right now, but I still feel like this game is just basically over. Like he's going to get Sludge Belcher down as well, and his opponent's going to be at 3. I don't see a recovery.
Huh. Well, I'm trying to think of a way for what can Amaz top deck here, unless he really is playing something very unique, like the Poison. But even then, that kind of enables the token, so he doesn't have a direct removal. I really don't foresee Amaz being able to pull himself out of this hole. But I've been surprised by Amaz in the past, and he has a Ragnaros. Unfortunately, that Ragnaros is not something like a Baron Geddon. Even so, that would have been really difficult to pull himself out of here.
Yeah.
I think Amaz's winner's bracket run has come to an end here. He's going to have to fight from the lower bracket. And Firebat is going to advance. And I kind of pointed out in the very beginning that Firebat is this really strong player that people have still been getting used to and learning. They've been watching him in things like, like in Deck Wars and other stuff. And they're kind of realizing that Firebat is a legit player. And he's kind of shown his chops here to why he's one of the best.
Indeed. Faceless Manipulator. I haven't seen a Golden Sludge Belcher yet.
Oh, it is so gross. Oh, man. If it was burping already, without even using the animations, it must be like farting and like sniffing out its boogers.
Oh, gosh.
That's... I don't even think Sludge
Belcher
Belcher wears deodorant, by the way. So him and Twitch Chat have a lot in common.
Whoa! Shots fired.
Boom!
Lightning Storm.
I'm in a feisty mood today, Admirable.
Is that what happens when
It's hot. It's 3 a.m. I'm in Taiwan.
I was just about to ask.
I'm taking no prisoners. Firebat advances to the winner's bracket semifinals, and Amaz drops 1-3. But great play from Firebat, showing versatility with Hunter and Shaman. 2 decks that haven't exactly dominated the metagame in recent memory. It was Druid and Rogue for a long time, and Firebat showing off his tech and his skills.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. The game with the Hunter was the one that's most key for me, where he passed up the opportunity to play Savannah Highmaid multiple times in favor of using a hero power and an alternative play. And I was really questioning it. But you saw at the end that he was able to exactly lethal Amaz with every point of damage that he could possibly deal at the end. So it ends up coming back to help him. It was like the Savannah Highmaid was almost like a distraction effort, more than it was a way to actually push for damage. So I'm really impressed with Firebat's play in this series. It's pretty tough to find a spot where he arguably even made a mistake. I think even in the spot where you can argue he made a mistake, there's a lot of reasons to push for lethal instead of trying to play safe. So you can never blame someone for making that kind of push because you know
I think
there's so much
so.
reasoning going
I
into
think
it. So
so. Let's pull up the bracket and see a status check because we're just still half an hour into our first day broadcast for North America. So people kind of joining us, they wanted to see Amaz, but Amaz will play tomorrow if he can climb through the losers bracket. We've seen people go all the way almost. Calento got ushered out in the winners bracket in the first round of EU and had to climb all the way back to fight Dark Wanix, the guy who ended up gatekeeping him both in the winners and the losers bracket. So the Maz isn't out yet, but he'll have a really tough road to get all the way to WEC finals. Meanwhile, coming up, we'll have Strifeco versus Ratenad, which is going to be a really exciting series just by the sole superstar name power. Strifeco, again, one of those heavy lifters that you really expect when he comes with something like Nax Ramus out. You expect Strifeco to come with guns blazing, with something cool, with something unique. I've heard some rumors of what Strifeco has been doing so far, but I won't spoil it for you until after the break. You're going to have to come back and hear what I have to say about what Strifeco has been doing recently, as well as Raynab. So stay tuned. WEC Qualifier continues right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the Tempo. Welcome back to the WEC World Championship. I was thinking about it because we have Tempo Store Raynad versus Cloud9's Strifeco, but my brain was thinking 2 steps ahead. The dangers of waking up pretty early for this cast. I'm having a lot of fun, Admirable, but we're just getting started. We saw Firebat advance to the winners bracket semifinals, where he'll face the winner of Strifeco versus Raynad. This matchup has a lot riding on the stakes. I think both players. I mean, it goes without saying that no one wants to lose, but I think specifically in this instance, both players definitely want to advance. Strifeco is like a proven winner. He's at the top, and Raynad still always, he's kind of like got this RDU mentality, chip on his shoulder, where he's just trying to prove that his runs, like his DreamHack semifinal run, wasn't a fluke. He's trying to prove that he's not just a popular streamer that likes to run his mouth, that he's also a very talented player at Hearthstone. So I think this is going to be a match with a lot of emotion and story writing behind it. I'm very excited.
Yeah, it's definitely nobody likes to lose, as you were talking about. But in this particular event, it sort of in the round ones when you're playing against someone who's touted as one of the stronger players in the world, you definitely want to pick up your win. Like, this is all about pride, as far as I'm concerned. Both of these players, they want the win more than they want anything else, I think. And then, of course, they want their shot at Firebat too, who's also being shown his talent last game. He's coming up as one of the biggest players that there is. But let's recap the bracket real quick. Firebat, as we saw last match, took down Amaz in a 3-1 match. And then, of course, now we're going to have Strifeco versus Raynad. Following that, we're going to have Alchemix versus Reels. And then Tides of Time versus Brad. And then the winners of those matches will face off against each other, as the winner of this match will face against Firebat. And then tomorrow we'll be having our losers bracket, which will be 5 matches, and then finally finishing up on day 3 with the upper bracket finals, the lower bracket finals, and then of course our final show match.
That's right. That's the schedule broken down for you. And don't forget that throughout this entire process, we wanted to be also to thank 2P for being able to host the tournament. They've been doing a great job with the EU qualifiers. Big shout out to Cindy, who's able to coordinate everything basically by herself and get ready for the WEC. For more information about the tournament, you can find it out at 2p.com. But more specifically, the thing that they're playing for is the beginning of September. The first week, there is going to be a $62,000 tournament in Hangzhou, China. And these guys want to kind of get their tickets immediately because placing top 2 guarantees you $2,000 just for showing up for the finals. You get $2,000, but think of it as the prize pool for this qualifier. Essentially, there's $4K distributed to the top 2 finalists, and the winner of the entire thing, or sorry, the final show match will be just that. It's a show match. It's not going to have anything on the line. There's no seeds or extra prize money, but there definitely is a lot of pride. Like Animal even mentioned last time, it's kind of just saying that you're the winner of the qualifier, and that's a big tournament with these kinds of names in it.
Yeah, 100% agree. And then, of course, battling out for their share of the $62,000 that's available later on. Not too shabby of a prize to be had going into it. So we're looking at the bans and picks for these players. This is something that's this is a little interesting to me. Like, I'm wondering why Strife Crow is choosing to ban out Hunter here instead of Rogue. Like, that, it's really strange to me because he's also playing Hunter. So I'm curious if this means that this Hunter is really aimed at Miracle Rogue, or if he perhaps anticipates that Reynad's going to be playing Aggro Rogue instead, because he's known to play aggro decks from time to time, even though sometimes they can be unconventional, like Warrior and with Rogue. And then, of course, I think that Reynad is making a wonderful choice where he's choosing to ban out Miracle Rogue.
Absolutely. I'm inclined to agree for sure. Miracle Rogue is still showing a lot of prominence. And even Hyped was mentioning the guy from Tempo Storm, and he's a Miracle Rogue savant, stating that Lotheb might be even benefiting Miracle Rogue the most. That could be under contention based off of who you're asking, but there is definitely that idea out there that Miracle Rogue is still just as potent, or even maybe more, thanks to Nax Ramus, depending on the situations that pan out. So we don't know exactly what these guys have prepared, but if I can share a little bit of insight, I heard that Strife Crow has been building a really cool Paladin deck that he feels like can't lose. So I'm not sure if this is the right thing to hype, because maybe he does end up playing it first round, maybe he loses with it. But I've heard that Strife Crow has put his deck building prowess to the test, and he's putting it on the grindstone and figuring out whether or not it can work out. So I'm pretty hyped to see his Paladin deck, that Strife Crow, because I've just been hearing Nimsh is saying, look, watch out for Strife Crow's Paladin deck. It's going to do well. So here, I'm throwing in a lot to see whether or not Strife Crow is going to be able to bring it.
Yeah, I'm sort of curious about that too. I haven't heard that. I haven't been speaking too much to the Cloud9 guys lately. I've been kind of in a different sector of the world. And touching on what you said about Miracle with Lotheb, I actually got a list from Sixo where he said you just put Lotheb in a Miracle Rogue, and it's great because you just attack them, play Lotheb to keep them off their spells, and then Shadow Step to Lotheb. And I was like, that actually seems pretty good. So I gave that a run for about an hour or two, and it seemed like it was pretty strong. But I think these players are ready to get into the game, and frankly, I am too, and I know that Twitch is. So let's take a look at what these players are bringing and how they're going to mulligan.
All right, the screen hasn't changed for me, Honorable, so I'm going to have to hop off the car real quick. But you take the game intro, all right, buddy?
Yeah, it's frozen for me as well.
Oh, okay. Well, so, we're in this together. I was like, well, you set it up perfectly, man, and I just didn't want to slam. I didn't want to miss the alley-oop, but unfortunately, there was never a pass to begin with. All right, so guys, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna be right back in like 2 seconds, so that way we can figure out the mulligan screen here. All right, so you can pull up the screen. I think I did see it on the Twitch stream itself. It's just that we're trying to get Skype in sync with everybody.
Yep. Hey, you're
terrors of an online broadcast. All right, cool. So we did say that we're going to take a couple of seconds to kind of sort it out, but it looks like we need a little bit longer than that. But don't worry, the stream is still happening. StrifeCro is going to still be playing right now. You're not going to miss a single beat because we have Milcast, our top guy, working on it. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, StrifeCro versus Reynad begins for WEC. Okay. What up, guys? We said one more minute, but the action is about to begin. We have the game ready, and we apologize for that hiccup, but that's just things that are naturally bound to happen when you have people across 3 different continents, basically taking on this game at the same time. So we appreciate everybody's understanding, but we're ready to go.
Yeah, I'm ready to go too. So these players have held the mulligans for a bit.
Okay.
And, yep, here we go.
All right, so we didn't miss anything whatsoever. We're going to start off with the good old Rogue versus what looks like to be the Paladin. And I'm very excited to see what his StrifeCro looks like. He came off a hot session of Hearthstone or time with his girlfriend. I have no idea which one it is.
Wow.
So either way, he's raring to go.
I don't even know what to say after that. I mean, what can I say, I guess?
He's good at both.
Consecrations and 2 wild pyromancers in StrifeCro's hand. Meanwhile, 2 Gadgets and Auctioneers in Reynad's hand. So both of these players are going to be fighting for the board early on, but in a much more passive way. Both these players respond instead of using very aggressive minions to kind of take control. So Reynad is looking forward, of course, to his turn 5, where he can use an Auctioneer and then follow it up with a couple of spells to refuel his hand and pick apart his opponent's board. And, of course, StrifeCro, very true to StrifeCro's nature, he'll turn anything into aggression if he can.
Yeah, he's not opposed for missing value immediately and just go for that board presence, like you kind of mentioned. He was one of the guys where I just saw him plop things that just don't do anything initially at face value, right? Like he plops a Defender of Argus on an empty board, and you're just like, well, why? And then you just kind of realize how much that kind of imposes a threat based off the other cards he has in his hand, and that's how he's able to kind of combo everything. He's very big into board presence. You just kind of pick his brain. He's always talking about how board presence dominates everything in this game, especially because you think about how spells and their effectiveness, but if you kind of look at minions as a spell that does damage every single turn, then you kind of tap more into the mind of StrifeCro and why he does the decisions he does. So it's very intelligent. I love hearing about what he has to say about the game because they're always so smart, and they share some insight of how I should develop this player.
Yeah, it's something. I'm glad you touched on that because he was actually one of the first people I saw to use Sun Fury Protector, and I was a little confused that Sun Fury Protector was in there at first, but then when I just see him play Sun Fury Protector without having any minions to buff, I was sort of like, I see why this card's in here now. It serves 2 purposes, and that's really where I actually got my first real lesson of Hearthstone, was watching StrifeCro play and how aggressively he fights for board control. Something very unique to watch.
All right, well, Reynad, like you said, he does have this double gadget stand. He also has Assassin's Blade, which is something that's been teched in recently, and I think it's to compensate for the fact that Lotheb is most likely in this deck. You have Lotheb, you take out things like Cold Blood, and you make up for the damage with the 12 that you get from Assassin's Blade. That should be enough, assuming your opponent doesn't just continually armor up or heal out of that range. Even so, but Assassin's Blade also does help shore up those matchups as well. You're just able to bash in and really put hurt on your opponent. So Reyna does have a lot of tools. He's going to have to draw into something better, though, especially with he had this preparation. Right now, the preparation doesn't really serve much of a purpose at the moment.
Unstable goal? That seems like a really interesting include in a Paladin, considering that your hero power makes 1/1s.
Huh. That's actually a really good point. Unstable goal completely nullifies your hero power. Huh. Interesting.
That's sort of weird to me.
It is weird, but I wouldn't put it past Strifecrow. I think you know what? It makes sense with things like Acolyte, because it helps you draw very effectively with it, and not to mention it's just like one of those things where it's annoying enough because this is, as much as it's a 1/3, the Undead Ghoul is actually a 2/3 because of the way it does its death rattle. So maybe you kind of improve your board presence. You're allowed to pick apart while drawing cards, similar to how Warriors to stabilize in the early game. You have True Silver Champion to act as your pseudo Fiery War Axe. So the more I think about it, there is synergy in that department, but definitely not working with the hero power in a very cooperative manner, in my opinion.
Yeah, sort of peculiar. It's just a testament to how strong that card it actually is. It doesn't seem like that big of a change from something like... This is going to seem like a really weird reference, but like Frostwolf Grunt, for instance, is a 2-mana 2/2 taunt, and as you were saying, that Unstable Goal is sort of like a 2-mana 2/3 taunt. That's basically exactly what it is. That 1 point increase in health makes all the difference in the world with a card like that.
Huh. I wonder if Reyna would have actually attacked with the Thalnos to see if anything changed, but in the end, the consequence is about similar.
Yeah, I don't think there's a draw that changes what playing the Assassin's Blade there, because
Yeah,
if for no other reason, he just wants to develop the Assassin's Blade.
Oh, if he coins out the Sunwalker, though, Reyna's got the perfect answer. He's got Gadget Sand, he's got a Backstab, he's got Deadly Poison, and he's able to effectively deal with it while being able to draw cards. And he still hasn't even used his preparation, so there's lots of potential explosiveness coming out of Reyna in the following turns. And the Paladin does still tend to struggle sometimes with this Miracle Rogue if it gives it time to set up. If you can kind of allow it to load itself, as much as you do have those heals, those taunts to really be annoying, that's all you are. You're annoying, and you're not necessarily a threat all the time because you're able to react to the rogue, but a lot of times, how are you able to kind of kill the rogue if you're just swatting down the flies every single time?
Yep. I'm thinking you and I are thinking pretty much exactly the same way. One of the biggest things that I've noticed about Paladin is that Paladin's able to kind of put up a pretty good fight against Miracle Rogue, but when in my experience, the Miracle Rogue ends up just having an edge in the end because of how powerful Leroy and 2 Shadow Steps are. When you combine that with the idea that Miracle Rogue can now also play Loatheb, you're taking out one of your opponent's potential turns where they can use Equality Consecrate to fight against the board presence you have. Because sometimes what you do is you just conceal an Azure Drake and an SI7 agent, or an Earthen Ring Farseer, another minion, and that extra 7 damage that's concealed allows you to make one big push even if your opponent has healed up from something like Holy Light or Guardian of Kings. And this is sort of exactly what Raydad's doing now. This is just an alternative way to do it. The Assassin's Blade with a poison on it represents 15 points of damage, and that's putting a lot of pressure on Strifecrow's ability to develop his board and make a pushback himself. He's just going to have to fight defensively through it. So when he expends a lot of tools, being this defensive, it allows Reynad to kind of flex his development plan how he sees fit. If he doesn't have Auctioneer, it gives him time to find Auctioneer. And when he does have Auctioneer, it gives him time to fill up a hand that he can explode with to take back over the game once the Paladin has restabilized. So, and this is like what you're seeing come into effect. So, like just what you were talking about, he's got a perfect answer to this Sunwalker right now. He's got Auctioneer with a Backstab. He's got Preparation. He's got a 5-point Assassin's Blade. He's got all the tools he needs to start making that endgame push.
I think so, and we'll find out whether or not Strifecrow's his turns end up paying out, because I'm also kind of a little surprised how much he's been holding the True Silver Champion. Granted, he has a second one, but using it as a premium removal opportunity against things like Drakes. And also, the weapons are one of the most effective ways to kind of deal with something like Loatheb. Wow, Reynad picks up the Conceal, though, for his Gadget Zan. That is a very nice draw.
Yeah, this is a... this feels like an Eviscerate turn to me.
Yep, well, he still can do both. Why not both? Ooh. Well, he does have the second Gadget Stand as well to kind of continue off that chain. And he has hit his Leroy, which is very important, with the Shadow Step. So he's got 23 damage the following turn, assuming his Gadget Stand gets cleared, because you kind of just assume your opponent's able to do something with Equality, maybe. Right.
Even if Gadget Stand doesn't get cleared this turn, Reynad has 27 damage next turn. Leroy, 2 Shadow Steps, 4 from Auctioneer, and then 5 from the Blade. So even if Strifecrow clears this, which I imagine he's going to, he's probably going to do something like Wild Pyromancer, Coin, and Consecrate, or maybe 2 Consecrates. That's really his only options to clear this. So even through one of those, his opponent's still, Reynad's still got 23 points of damage.
Yeah.
And Strifecrow can only heal to 22. It's funny that you were talking about that one attack would have kept him alive for another turn. I don't know if it makes a difference, but that one attack does end up being whether or not he can actually live for another turn or not. But again, I don't think it makes much of a difference in this game.
Yeah, there is a lot to be said that Reynad drew the exact cards he needs to kind of end the game, but at the same time, that's just kind of what Paladin allows Miracle Rogue to do. And this is what happens with the victim. It becomes the victim of playing a little too slow. As much as Paladin's really cool, and I'm a little bit regretful already that I said that Strifecrow doesn't lose with this deck, but maybe he wasn't playing many Miracle Rogues, or at least ones that get such a great start to this, where they draw exactly what they need by turn 8 to Leroy double Shadow Step and use the Assassin's Blade. So Reynad's going to start off this series 1-0, and I think that's exactly how he wants to. He's able to take out Paladin.
Looking at Reynad's face, it's like he doesn't even like winning with this deck. He's just like, oh, of course I have Leroy and 2 Shadow Steps with 5-point Assassin's Blade out. Yeah, really great game, right?
He's definitely mad at somebody right now. He's not happy.
I think he's mad at Blizzard is what he's mad at. Nobody should be able to deal that much damage on turn 8 after being able to draw that many cards. Moving on, though, this is one of the reasons why I like this ban format a lot, and I think that I'm still going to continue to say it. I think it's wrong to not ban Miracle Rogue. I think if you're trying to prepare a lineup for Miracle Rogue, that you're opening yourself up to bad things happening. Because what if your opponent decides to play Aggro Rogue and you're prepared for Miracle Rogue? And then you've kind of outplayed yourself at that point. It's such a very clear ban to me. I think Gadget Zane Auctioneer is too powerful and allows the decks too much flexibility. So I think that both of these players played really well in these games. Reynad obviously drew very well. I mean, that's part of what goes into Miracle Rogue, is that it pretty much always draws very well. And Strifecrow's deck is interesting to say the least. He had a bit of a clunky draw to start, so not a lot of gameplay being shown, or a lot of perhaps even what his deck really does. But not banning Miracle Rogue, I think it's a mistake from the get-go. So I'd be surprised to hear some reasoning behind that. But now going into this, I think the only reason he wouldn't ban Miracle Rogue is if for some reason this Hunter was really strong against it. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this Hunter be really aimed at that deck.
I would be surprised if it's full-on Face Hunter, just because I haven't seen Strifecrow to kind of play that often. The only time I have was back when Unleashed was first changed to 2 mana, and everyone was playing Face Hunter. I remember seeing it at Fight Night, I think, where he was able to kind of employ it. But I don't really see Strifecrow as much as that aggro player. You know, he's kind of like Dark Onyx, where I find it hard to put 2 and 2 together, but they are capable of doing it when time calls for it. It could be anti-Miracle Tech. Maybe he has Lotheb in his Hunter as well, so he's feeling more confident about that matchup. It seems like at Lotheb, again, you can kind of just slide it in, and it has practicality, because who doesn't like disrupting your opponent's turn and sealing your win condition, right? Those are the things that are really powerful in Hearthstone, especially if you're able to put out a minion 5/5 that gets you return on value immediately with such good abilities. So I think maybe Strifecrow has that in mind. Maybe he's confident with his Druid to slay the Rogue. We can't really tell, because Strifecrow is one of those unique deck builders where sometimes he just goes against the grain with stuff. I know for a long time you guys were thinking about, like, why even one Lightning Storm and Shaman back at, what was it, Deck Wars season finale, right? Yeah. They were kind of wondering, like, why would you ever do that? But he has his reasons. So I'm not ruling out Strifecrow, but he still has a really big uphill climb with Miracle Rogue facing at him.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But the other thing to note is that there's more than one way that Hunter could approach how to beat Rogue. It's not necessarily just like a face Hunter that's going to throw Arcane Shot and Arcane Golems at your opponent's face and just hope to get the job done. There's a lot of tools it could use to fight them. Taunts are a really good measure for it, because your hero power adds up to so much natural damage throughout the course of the game that when your opponent's having to fight through taunts from Hunter, you end up just dealing so much incidental damage that you can actually push for lethal towards the end. So a couple different angles that you can take. I'm really interested to see which one it actually is, though. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Hunter in this matchup right here, because if Hunter isn't the deck that you have for Miracle, I don't think it was your Paladin deck.
Well, interesting you mentioned that. I just got a message from RDU who says Ghoul actually counters Leroy because it's good against the Ghoul is able to take on Leroy immediately. So maybe it counters the Miracle in that respect. You just time your Ghoul so that way he can't Leroy immediately. At least, he can't really like go through it with Shadow Step because it's just another taunt that's really annoying. It's that plus the Sludge Belcher are your anti-miracle cards, in addition to Lotheb. So that's maybe an observation as well. I'm not sure how much merit that is to it, but RDU is also a big miracle player, so maybe he knows. I'm just kind of sharing some insight that I got immediately on Skype.
For sure. I think it's good information. I think it's a really good thing to note, too. A lot of people play taunts in these sorts of decks, and they're just ready to put taunts out on whatever their curve is, but a lot of these times these taunts are meant to disrupt key turns from your opponent.
Yeah, so I guess the speculation was that maybe he played his Undead Ghoul a little bit too early, but maybe Strifeco is trying to combo off of his Acolyte. I'm not sure. I know that synergy does exist, though, which is really cool. Yep. Regardless, though, that's in the past, so Strifeco has to kind of move on from it. He has... Oh, sorry, we're getting the message that the games are ready, so no more speculation, man. Let's just go straight into the game and find out what happens. Reynad's up 1-0, and he does still have pretty good decks to kind of follow this up upon with Warrior and the Warlock, Druid. Both seeing lots of popularity.
Huh. Well, he is going with Druid. Haunted Creeper, no surprise to be seen in here. I don't think this really gives an indicator of whether or not he's token. This seems like a card that Strifeco would just play anyway. Again, sort of his style. Oh, it is going to be token, though.
It is token Druid.
That's a really strong curve, too.
It's about as clean as it gets, as the Jackson 5 taught me.
Well, let me ask you this. Would you rather have an Innervate hand, or would you rather have a hand like this?
Depends what I get with the Innervate. I mean a Violet Teacher Innervate.
Let's say you can have an Innervate and 2 random cards, or you can have this hand. Which one would you choose?
I choose this hand. This hand's a lot more annoying for Miracle to deal with on a turn-to-turn basis, versus if you just push out something really powerful. Say you were playing a Yeti or a Violet Teacher. They still can just backstab. Why not
sometimes
both?
You get both, yeah.
Why not both? Push your hands together, right?
This is kind of a tough turn now. I don't even know if he uses this Innervate.
I think Argent Squire loses significant power every turn past turn 1. So I like pushing out early. It's still annoying for Rogue to deal with. They need to do 2 things to it. Not to mention that he's first.
There's the old Lotheb Miracle Rogue. Maybe it's going to rear its ugly head.
Well,
it's pretty brutal to Lotheb 2 or 3 turns in a row, I have to admit. Every time I did that, I felt so dirty. I was like, oh my gosh, my opponent cannot cast anything. This is really bad. So like they would play an Azure Drake, and then I would attack the Azure Drake with Lotheb, and then Shadow Step the Lotheb, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm healing the Lotheb and ruining their next turn of spells.
What makes it really powerful, too, is also the fact that when you Shadow Step it, it gives you room to squeeze in things like Van Cleave. Say you play Lotheb on 5, your opponent can't respond, they just drop something, you trade, you Shadow Step, then you put out a Van Cleef at a 6/6 because of all the cards played, and all of a sudden they can't deal with that, and you've compensated the 6 damage with Shadow Step immediately already. So it says that you're not losing anything. In fact, you're just building up your board presence and playing it more control style, which is very much annoying for your opponents to deal with. So Lotheb brings a lot of versatility to even the Miracle Rogue, the deck it's supposed to counter.
Yeah, this could just be another one of those oversights where you print a card that you feel like you're like, ha, gotcha, Miracle Rogue, and it's like, oh,
JK,
we actually got his back.
Not quite what was planned. All right, well, Strifeco picks up combo, and he does have Innervate, so by all means, there is a way for him to end the game early. But Reynad still has ways to kind of deal with this. You just kind of have AoE, and that's the best way to clear the board against something like this.
Yeah, this is a weird spot to be in. Reynad's hand's kind of clunky, honestly. He's got a lot of efficient cards, and he's got a lot of little 2-card combos, but he's going to be taking some damage along the way. And as you said, Strifeco's already got the combo put together. I don't think that Reynad suspects his opponent's got the combo put together with an Innervate so far. That would be a pretty tough range to imagine.
Oh, okay.
Backstab, I imagine, is very likely this turn.
Yeah, and set up for a Blade Flurry the following turn. He is kind of hesitant, so maybe he's rethinking his decision on whether or not that was the optimal play.
You attack here with the dagger? I guess you do.
Well, if you plan on Blade Flurrying, then the outcome's about the same. You just kind of hope your opponent doesn't have Power of the Wild. But then even so, you still have the Thalanos. You're kind of just hoping that if for a reason he's not able to kind of put it outside of range.
That's what that attack is. by the way. It's a hedge against Power of the Wild. If Strifeco had Power of the Wild, you're looking at a pretty bad spot for Reynad.
Yeah.
But if he attacks, he's going to be taking the damage he intends to take anyway. And when you look at his hand, if he Blade Flurries, he doesn't have any mana to do anything afterwards. So his turn is just set up to next turn Blade Flurry anyway. And so one way he loses a dagger, but it's not really that big of a deal because, again, if he gets Power of the Wild, this is an easier board to deal with than before, where it was just now you're facing down an extremely ugly board and you've taken extra damage from it.
How about this innervated Lotheb play that Strifeco has at his fingertips?
That's what he's thinking about, for sure. I'm curious how much merit there actually is to just Savage Roaring right here.
Oh man, I didn't even consider that possibility because you always kind of put 2 and 2 together, but
right, because the Savage Roar is getting in just as much damage as it would with Force Nature right here. But if you happen to draw a second one, it makes a lot of sense to
get that 12 damage in now.
Right, but I think the Lotheb is slightly better. It just can really throw your opponent's turn off.
All right, well,
now what does Reynad do? He's on 4 mana, and the only thing he has available to him is SI7 Agent.
Yeah, and even so, the SI7 Agent isn't going to even be able to be comboed. So Strifeco takes a very dominant approach here by using Innervate early, but Lotheb already getting work in and able to sneak in that 5 damage. Not to mention that Strifeco still has combo and picks up a swipe, so he's got ways to kind of whittle down his opponent.
Yeah, that's a really weird draw. I guess he's just going to be pushing. He's just going to attack for 6 and then hero power. It's really tough to envision using swipe here.
Well, maybe now he uses Savage Roar.
What in the heck? Let me count this damage roll. 10 plus 3. Oh, he's actually got lethal next turn with Force of Nature plus Lotheb. That actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. All right. So Strifeco put himself in a position to win immediately. Reynad needs to top deck something like his Gadgets, and that'd be mint.
So that at least is what he was thinking about the turn before. Was he was like, Savage Roar is just as good here. Like, I still get an 8 points of damage from my Savage Roar with just these 3 minions on the board. Should I use it now and make a push for lethal? So it makes a lot of sense to do it that way, honestly. Like, look at how much pressure Reynad's under. He can't. I don't even think he can live. He's got to have a way to heal and clear everything.
Well, if he drops Lotheb, he actually does live, because assuming he doesn't know what his opponent has, but his opponent only has spells. You need to top deck something like Druid of the Claw in order to win, or even Keeper of the Grove. But even so, that's still not enough insurance. Do you go for like a Hail Mary Van Cleef play? Oh man, he's picking up the Assassin's Blade.
I think he has to. He has to try to do something to get rid of this Lotheb, and this is really the only option he has. It's just one of those unfortunate spots where, I mean, that's sort of the power that Lotheb can present against a very spell-heavy deck. Yep. And at this stage, I guess Reynad just took the better option, saying, I hope you don't have spells to just do 3 damage, but Strifeco does, and he evens up this series. And takes out a really important deck in the Miracle Rogue. So, you know what? The storm has been weathered here for Strifeco. And I definitely think that's the most imposing of the 3 decks. Because Miracle still can just explode out of nowhere and take out the series. So now Reynad's down to his Warrior and his Warlock deck. Which, I'm not exactly sure which he's running. Because I know he is fond of both the Zoo and the Handlock. He likes both decks a lot. And that could affect of whether or not what he chooses for this next matchup. Yep, I would suspect, if he's going into this match, that Zoo is really a pretty easy choice for him. One of the hardest things for him to do is fight through Miracle Rogue, but he just intends to ban Miracle Rogue throughout the course of the tournament, so it just increases the strength that your Zoo deck has. I'd be kind of surprised if it's not Zoo, but Handlock's not unthinkable by any means.
Sure. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have game number 3 between Reynad and Strifeco. Don't go anywhere. We'll return right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the WEC qualifiers for North America. Reynad versus Strifecode Game 3 coming up, where it's a very pivotal game to determine who's going to be at match point afterwards. It is best of 5. There is one ban. And as you pull up on your screen, we're left with the Druid versus either the Warrior or the Warlock. And I don't imagine that Reynad would go with Warrior here because I think both sides of the Warrior, at least the ones that we know of, can be pretty weak to the Druid, especially the Token Druid, which can just explode. And with things like the Haunted Creeper coming out, that just makes Brawl even worse. So I would assume that Reynad's going to go with the Warlock here, but we're not exactly sure which iteration of Warlock will come out.
Yeah, I think either iteration's fine in this circumstance, and I would suspect it's going to be Zoo. The deck just got a lot stronger with Nax, with a couple of cards it's been presented with, and so I'd be pretty surprised for it to not be Zoo. But again, Handlock's not unthinkable by any means. I think Handlock's still a strong choice, and I know that Reynad likes to play Handlock a lot. So
he does. He loves it. Both sides of Warlock, he loves climbing ladder with as well. His stream viewers definitely know that Reynad's very fond of this class.
If his Warlock is Zoo, it's definitely going to be Zoo here, because it's strong versus both of the decks that are left. But to that same degree, it could also be Warrior. So kind of tough. Actually, now that I think about it,
I'm leaning on your side of the camp where I think it's the Zoo. I think it's too strong. Oh, it is the Warrior though.
Yeah, I was just thinking
Warrior with interesting cards.
I actually, I pointed this out to myself, of all things. Sometimes you just need to think a little bit more. If his last deck is Zoo, Zoo's actually good versus both of these. So what he might be trying to do is get a little bit more information out of what these decks are before he can adopt his or adapt his mulligan choices. So he's just trying to pick up a win here with Warrior, and then move forward with Zoo from there. And then he's also potentially trying to conceal his Warlock deck from other players, so that moving forward in the tournament, they know if he's playing Zoo or if he's playing Handlock.
Okay, so it's the tournament play, not necessarily just the matchup play. Okay, right. I like it. Very intelligent. Good observation. Now, Strifecode does start off with the Haunted Creeper, but one thing that is interesting is the dynamic between Haunted Creeper and this Undead Ghoul, where it seems like this Undead Ghoul has its number. So Reynad does have these options to kind of swat down the token start, and I want to see how this kind of pans out, because the Sludge Belcher is another card that people say just fits so perfectly in what Control Warrior wants to do. And before you kind of played Azure Drake, because what else better could you do? It just naturally cycles, gives you good stats in a body and a card draw. But the Belcher, I think, is exactly up the alley of what Control Warrior wants. It makes it really difficult to get through, so that like Armor Smith... Oh, sorry, what would you want to say?
Yeah, it looks a lot like... I was going to touch on... Blizzard paid a lot of attention, it feels like, to pros when they were coming up with these Nax cards. Because one of the biggest complaints was the lack of playable 5-drops. It was just basically it was Azure Drake, or if you were playing Druid, you had Druid of the Claw. And that was it. But now in this set, we're seeing Sludge Belchers come along, Lothebs come along. You're going to see Spectral Knight coming along, the 4/6 that can't be targeted by hero powers or spells. They're printing a lot of 5-drops to give players options, and it's really changing the way that some of these decks are being played. So you're seeing a lot of old decks that were powerful come back into the fray, but at the same time, with that many 5-drops getting played, it's unlocking the potential for new strategies to come out as well.
Oh man, how tempting is it to Keeper the Grove this?
It is really tempting. It's hard. It's really hard not to. I don't think he's got an option, honestly. I think he could even like see some of the cards in his opponent's hand that he wants to keep for later, and still probably keep for the Grove now just to get the board presence.
Sure.
How hard is it to not Sludge Belcher this turn?
I think it's really difficult because everything else doesn't get anything done. Shield blocks draw you closer to something that you probably won't be able to play either way. What I love about the Belcher and the synergy is just, again, it's really annoying what the Control Warrior wants to stall for time. It fills a very important drop for the Warrior to hit. Not to mention that it also has extra synergies with, things like Armor Smith. They have to go through 2 iterations of minions rather than just 1. You have the ability to use the token as a Cruel Taskmaster for a trade if your opponent isn't able to deal with it immediately. So all these kinds of small things that allow the Warrior to kind of gain back in control, and what the Belcher represents is very effective for this Warrior deck.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It's got all the tools you need to slow down decks. And the fact that honestly, Sludge Belcher would probably be worse if it was a 4/7 in some regards, because what happens is when it gets overkilled, the 2 health that the second taunt has makes all the difference in the world. So it would be better in a lot of respects, but at the same time, it's like sort of like a trade-off where the extra minion makes a lot more difference than just having big stats are concerned. I would prefer to have 2 minions, honestly. That's just me. But sometimes it can come back to bite you, like if a silence comes through. But it helps you if something like Black Knight comes through. It looks like he's struggling with decision, and rightfully so. This is a pretty tough turn to deal with.
You think so? You're really worried about what his opponent can have. He's going to value this Divine Shield and just go for the Power of the Wild play afterwards. Strife needs to hurry up, otherwise he's going to miss his attack. Ah, he does get it though, right at the last second, so that was really important. You don't want to miss that 5 damage. That's way too big to be missing. He also kind of messed up the state of his game board, a little mispositioned now, but it's not that big of a deal.
All those years of StarCraft coming in handy.
Sure.
Yep, I agree with Lothar. There's just no other play. You got to get something down, and you have to start picking apart this board. This is a perfect card to do it with because your opponent can't swipe a Wrath. So
you can't trade it in, though, and put a Violet Teacher, which is 2 3/5s that Warrior has to deal with.
Now, let me ask you this. When he trades it in, does he use his 2/2s, or does he use his 3/5 and his 2/2? He'd be sacrificing more health if he used a 3/5 and a 2/2, but... Oh, we can also do it this way.
Yeah.
Violet Teacher
actually
cost
think
more.
that originally, so I was like, oh, that's a really creative way to think about it, and I was trying to think of all the possibilities. But in the end, I think this is almost superior and almost...
I assumed he had 5 mana for some reason. I saw Lothar at 5, and I was going into 5.
Totally fair assumption, and sometimes we know Lothar pigeonholes mana anyways.
Yep.
And it also has another easy drop, and that's kind of what the Sludge and Lothar represent. It just gives it more consistency in the mid game. And he already did use the Keeper, so maybe the Sylvanas can do work.
You know, he's getting low on life, though. It is something he's worried about. Because Strifeco used Savage Roar early on. I'm curious if Raynad thinks that means he has another copy of Savage Roar.
True. All things that he can represent the damage.
You saw him hesitate for a moment. He doesn't really have an option other than to play Sylvanas here, though.
Uh-huh. Let's see if Strifeco top deck something really important like a Keeper of the Grove as well. That might be able to seal it away. A Lothar.
Oh, wow. That's going to prevent shield blocks.
Whoa. And something like Brawl, right? Brawl is a really powerful follow-up to Sylvanas, so that way you steal whatever comes out.
Yeah, this could be bad news. He's not even going to be able to execute his own Sylvanas if he draws it.
Oh, no. The travesty. Strifeco, at the same time, I realized that if he plays Lotheb, it's almost insurance that Sylvanas will get something value-wise. Like, he won't be able to kill itself otherwise. Unless he's able to use something on itself, like Cruel Taskmaster. Or, like, a shield slam. But that's still a little inefficient.
He's really struggling between Lotheb and Harvest Golem here. Looks like, or maybe even Big Game Hunter. I can't imagine you want to play Big Game Hunter here.
Well, yeah, I like what Lotheb does, yeah.
Yeah, I like Lotheb here a lot, too.
Ooh, nasty for Raynad. He picks up a slam, which isn't very helpful.
Hey, that's a perfect 7 mana, though. He's got Gorehowl here, but he's at 9 life. Like, how much more can he afford to pay?
Well, I mean, he can also use the Gorehowl to remove one of the smaller minions, and hopefully he steals another one, so taking away 3 damage effectively.
Well, he can also use the Fiery Oryx and armor up, too. So something I'm looking at is, do you Fiery Oryx the 1/1 so you can always take a better minion? So that way you never take the 1/1 from your opponent's board? Or do you Fiery Oryx like the 2/2 and then hope to steal the 3/5 or hope to steal one of the 3/5s afterwards?
I think it plays armor. Okay, the Gorehowl. I think it plays a lot into what your opponent's range is. That 1 damage does make the difference. So he's going to be going down to 7 or 8. 7 means you die to Force of Nature hero power, right? And then
he's going to be dying to big pieces of combo like that, I think, regardless.
Okay. All right, well, this is a big moment. He needs to steal one of the bigger minions, and he does. He gets the Keeper of the Grove. So that's a nice win for Raynad.
2 points of damage will end this game. That's not it. Wow, Raynad's got a big swing here with 2 shield blocks, too. He might be able to turn this game back around. And Strifeco's got a big decision in front of him, too. Does he want to flood the board with all of these minions right now? Or does he want to continue to save this Big Game Hunter? How much value does this Big Game Hunter hold when your opponent's down to such a low amount of life and almost able to turn it back around?
I think you got to hold it, right? What if you drop something like an Alex Straza and all of a sudden bounces back and you need a way to answer it immediately?
Right.
I think holding it is the right call.
A tough one from as far as I'm concerned. I would have taken a little bit more time.
Whoa!
Deathwing!
Oh my goodness!
What on earth is going on?
Oh, Reynad's blinking slowly because he's like, careful, don't get too excited. Level.
I don't think I could put Deathwing in any of my decks anymore because when I draw it, my eyes just get huge.
That is amazing. I want to see it being played. I don't care anymore if Reynad wins or loses. He needs to play Deathwing somehow this game.
But Strifecrow's got Big Game Hunter in his hand.
Oh my god, you're so...
Oh no.
No, I mean, you obviously try to bait out first. If you would play Ysera before Deathwing, certainly against Druid. Druids have a very difficult time with it.
Ysera's not going to bait out Big Game Hunter, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh my gosh. He may have to play the Deathwing at some point, too.
How do you go about this? You want to kind of utilize your Shield Slam immediately, but the mana gets a little clunky after that.
I think he's got a Shield Slam here. I think you want to Shield Slam the 3/5, and then continue to work your way down the board. I don't see Slam drawing a card this matchup. Like, you need to conserve a lot because you have so much power in your hand that all you have to do is get to a stable point in the game.
Survive.
You're gonna be winning. So like your life, every single point of life matters so much right now.
I like it. I like the idea of armoring up. I like utilizing Slam here as removal, taking out what it is. He's got to hurry up though. Time's almost running out.
Yep. I like the play.
Okay.
I think this is his best way to mitigate damage, and I think that's what he should be most concerned with at the moment.
Still, Force of Nature top deck for Strifer could end this game early, and Reynad would not have an opportunity to play either of his big minions that's sitting in his hand at the moment. Strefko needs that Force of Nature right now.
Ooh. Swipe is not going to do it.